Hi, welcome MFM members. I am Beth Osborne. I'm the Director of Marketing and Content at Marketron and an MFM member. And today I'm chatting with Gordon Borrell, who's the CEO of Borrell and Associates. And we're going to be talking about the Borrell-RAB Benchmarking Report on digital sales, which is in its 13th year. Some really great information in there for everybody in radio. Um, the report is out, and we did have a webinar with REB in February. But Gordon's going to talk about some specific things that matter to finance folks. So thanks again, Gordon, for joining us and chatting with me today.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah. So first of all, can you just kind of give the audience an overview about the report?
Sure. We've done it for 13 years, so we get to see some pretty significant trends. And I think in this report, it's undeniably clear that digital has become radio's growth engine. If you want to get net growth in revenue and you're in the radio business, or hell, in any business for that matter, TV competitors, cable competitors, newspaper competitors, but in radio in particular, you'll need a strong focus on digital while doing your best to maintain the decline or fight the decline in radio sales. It's a delicate balancing act with the gravitational pull toward radio sales. It's kind of in the wrong direction for too many radio stations. It's not quite a Sophie's choice scenario, where you gotta let one die because you can only get one to live. Not that, but it's more like deciding, you've got twin daughters and which one's going to get 80% of the college fund. When one just got into Harvard and the other's greatest aspiration after, high school is to learn to become a tattoo artist. So it's, I hate to put it in those stark terms, but that's the way it is. We've had evidence now for a very long time that radio has been in decline and it's going to continue to decline. So the best you can possibly do is try to maintain it, not decline anymore. And the best way to do that actually is to have a really strong digital sales opportunity for your advertisers. They'll be impressed by that. They might buy radio, but the only opportunity for growth is digital. And I think you'll also find in the report some really positive attitude that I think kind of exudes. And it really does come from me because I write the report, but it has a benefit, I think, of being true. And that is among media competitors in TV, newspapers, and cable. Radio is the comeback kid. And it's just really remarkable. It's not surprising to me because people have always told me, hey, radio doesn't really understand that the internet exists. This is in the 2000s and 2010 period, right? But watch out when they wake up to it, they're going to seize it as their own. And I kept saying, yeah, sure, right. And they did. And I think it took the spurs of the pandemic to really get a lot of folks in the radio industry to wake up, when suddenly they were going, crap, nobody's buying radio because everybody's perception, which happens to be true, is that hardly anybody's listening to radio during the pandemic because everybody is at home. What else do we got to sell? Hey, we got this digital stuff, and bam, it almost magically happened. That's a little bit of an unfair characterization, kind of a stereotype, but it's kind of true. Um, and I think, the evidence of what they're capable of doing, the radio industry, and how remarkable they are is, in any disruptive innovation, people tend to take their current business model and cram it into the new technology. So newspapers kind of tried to cram the business model of classified advertising, where you have to pay for every ad, into the internet. And that really didn't work, and they kind of collapsed as a result. TV is doing the same thing. Their whole interpretation, in a lot of ways, of the opportunity in digital is OTT, is video, because that's all they know is video. Guess what? The largest segment of radio's digital advertising is, if you discount banner ads, which is really the largest. Number two is video, and number three is audio. So it's created this really interesting phenomenon that again underscores how really interesting and kind of brilliant radio is. And that is radio and audio industry now is selling more video advertising on the digital side than audio advertising. So those things really rang true in the report. The last thing was it's really evident, and this comes from the radio managers we surveyed, over 200 of them. Strategies need revisiting. They were really polished up nicely out of necessity, during the pandemic. But that's 4 years old now, and more radio managers told us that their strategies were generally poor, or just lacking in some way, more than said, "Hey, we've got really good strategies," and that hadn't happened since 2018.
Right. Yeah. Lots of good pieces of data in the report, and you're right, in that radio has some great opportunities, very resilient. And I think, something I write about a lot is this focus on being local first and knowing the market. And that's kind of like that's the secret sauce for radio a lot of times when, they're competing with like a national agency or something like that. So my next question is, what do you think some of the most important things in the report, that finance people should look into and um, wonder about?
Yeah, I think, for finance people, for media financial managers, it's all about the numbers. Put the emotions and the passion and everything and preferences aside. Numbers really tell the story. So how can you boil the opportunity down to numbers and get an appropriate set of dashboard metrics? And I think the first thing to understand is the goal, I believe, with radio and its digital operations is to achieve net new growth. So that would be goal number one to me. If you add the digital and the radio revenues, terrestrial radio advertising revenues together, you should be moving toward net new growth. If you look at the compound annual growth rate of radio from 2015 to 2019, in that 4 year period, what you'll see is negative 1.8% compound annual growth rate in that period. If you look at the period from 2020 to 2024 for the radio industry, you'll see a positive growth rate of 4.1%. It would not be achievable without a significant growth in digital. So I think that's really an important thing to note. A lot of CEOs were focusing on in late 2020, early 2021. Oh, we're getting back to, pre-pandemic levels. The growth, everybody calm down. The bottom dropped out in 2020 when everybody stayed at home, didn't go to work, and didn't listen to radio. So we're getting back to pre-pandemic levels. That never happened. So the measurement really is adding the two together. How do we get net new growth? We're not back at the levels we were in 2015, or certainly not back in 2019 in terms of terrestrial radio advertising, and never will be. It's just going to continue to decline. So that's one. I think another metric, and I know a lot of the industry looks at this, is what percentage of total revenue do you get from digital sales? So it's gone in the past 4 or 5 years from 21% up to last year's rate of 24%. So for the industry as a whole, the standard is 24% of your total revenues ought to be coming from digital sales. For the public companies, they average 30%. And for Town Square, which is kind of the poster child of digital, they were at 43% last year. That to me is kind of a faulty metric. It is a metric, and you should be looking at it. But as I kind of flippantly tell a lot of people, Beth, yeah, if you want to be 100% digital sales, you know what to do. So sure, you can get that higher and higher by dropping the ball in radio, and you don't want to do that. So it's one metric, and I think it's something you should take a look at. The other thing I caution financial managers is looking at a benchmark based on growth, year over year growth, particularly for digital. Um, it's almost necessarily true that if you drop the ball in digital and you're doing poorly, you're going to have a higher growth rate. So you look at Saga Communications, which, kind of denied the internet existed for a couple of decades. And they're great now, and they're really jumping on digital. They really understand it, really moving forward under their new CEO, Chris Forgy. Um, the industry for the growth rate for publicly held companies on digital last year was about 8%. So the digital revenue overall for publicly held companies, seven of them, grew 8%. Saga led the pack at 20%. So there's an example where, okay, yeah, you're going to have really high growth rate if you suck maybe in previous years. Um, so you can go after, I think, exponential growth, but only if you understand what's actually available in the market. And I think the best metric would be market share of what we call in the report obtainable digital revenue in each market. That's the amount of digital advertising that local advertisers are willing to spend with a local media company. 85% of it goes out of the market to Facebook and Google and Amazon and everybody else. The other 15% stays back in the market. That's obtainable. What's your share of that? That's an important metric.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that the attainable digital revenue that's in the report, and it's for like 513 markets. So like obviously, I mean not every market, but lots of different markets, and that's a really good data point for finance and leadership and sales to look at. So thinking of that and then thinking of like the benchmarking numbers that are actually in the report, like how can finance use that for forecasting?
Um, well, for forecasting, I don't think the report has numbers beyond 2024. And I'm sorry, I can't recall. So, yeah, maybe you can forecast for 2025 if you have access to those numbers. But, I think if you can apply a percentage of that, like what share do you want to get? So let's do this. If I were a financial manager and I were doing some forecasting, I would say, let's take a look at what the best practice levels are for radio companies. And the best practice levels, so there are three different levels in the report for your market. So you find your market range, whether it's market 1 through 10, which are the largest markets, or 20 through 50, which I think is our next level, et cetera. So you find where your market is, and you look at either the average or the median or the best practice. Most people are close to average, right? That's how the numbers work. You really do want to look at best practice. That's the average of the top five performers in your peer group. And you go, how do we get that? And I think what you would do is say, where are we now? You can calculate your percentage if you know your digital revenue in that market for that cluster or group of clusters because they're market ranges. And then you say, how do we get to the best practice? Highly likely you're not there. 95% of companies pretty much are not at the best practice level. And then how do we develop a path toward achieving that growth? And you might be looking at 20, 30, or 40% annual growth to get there, which will shock the hell out of a lot of people. But if you don't develop a plan to do something like that, you're going to still maintain pretty much average, growth. So stealing market share should be, I think, a key strategy because it is possible. And I got to tell you, with radio, it's highly probable that the radio companies out there, the ones that are very aggressive in digital, are the most likely to be stealing share from the cable companies and the newspapers and the television stations.
Right. Yes. So the last question I wanted to ask you is the part of the report you asked general managers about commissions and if they had changed them or restructured them, and most of them said they haven't changed them in 3 years. This is something that is part of the finance decision because it's obviously money related. Like, how can finance and sales maybe work together to, you know, reconsider the commission structure so that it, incentivizes or keeps your best sellers. You know, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, Beth, that's a really, really good question. And my observations are that not only the radio industry, but everybody else is all across the board on this. Nobody's hit on a secret formula. And it's not because the industry hasn't collaborated. I think everybody's asking everybody else, hey, what are you doing? And I've seen it gone, back and forth. Hey, we're going to give higher commissions. We're going to give, to digital, or we're going to pay a higher base to the digital, folks because we're hiring digital only people in. I mean, it's just all across the board. And I think it really depends on what works for the sales staff. You have a lot of individuals. You just don't have a group that's cohesively one. There are people who are incentivized by money and people who are incentivized by a great work environment, people who are incentivized by time off, and people who, hell, just love the thrill of the sale. So here's my advice if you're a financial manager. I think you collaborate with the top sales managers and the people who are just really, really good and understand the psychology of sales and their salespeople, and just and prompt it. They're not always ready or willing or eager to keep changing sales structures. In fact, they're afraid to because for sales staff, it feels like a game. Sales staff go, oh, now that I'm doing really well, you want to lower my commission, or you want to hire my commission and lower my base. It's like, so they're really hesitant to do that. But if financial managers get in and say, hey, let's look at this from a numbers perspective. How can we really drive sales and compensate your staff fairly, on those sales? If the company's revenue grows significantly, then sales staff ought to be rewarded for it. Let's see how we can do that. And let's put a focus on what we should be incentivizing the most. I'm slowing down for effect because this is the most important part. And this is going to be a little difficult in some companies to achieve. Our only growth engine is digital. Radio, sales, at best, we can keep them flat, but more likely they're going to continue to decline. It's going to be harder and harder to sell. So we want to invest more in driving these digital sales because that, again, is our only growth engine. How do we do that? And I think that's the discussion that needs to take place. Unfortunately, I don't have the formula. Their sales staffs know, we should probably give people more incentive for new business, higher commissions for generating new business and bringing new clients in. We bring new digital only clients. We can sell them radio advertising. We bring in new radio clients. We can sell them more digital advertising and lower commissions on renewals. But, there are many other ways to look at it. And I think it's got to be decided, as I said, according to the individuals and who are actually making the sales.
Yeah, there's no magic answer for that for sure. Every station and market are unique. Every salesperson is unique. We do have a commission calculator actually on the Marketron.com site that allows people to kind of experiment with different kind of commissions to see what it would look like in the real world, kind of thing if that's the model that you use for sales. So thank you so much, Gordon, for chatting with me today. I'm sure all the MFM members will appreciate all your insights and candor. And I just wanted to also say that you're going to be presenting on the report at the NAB, which is just a few weeks away. And my colleague Dustin Wilson will be on the panel, and some other people, Mike Holvey from RAB as the moderator. It's called The Local Advertising Buying Landscape. What are clients buying, and how are radio sellers succeeding or missing out? And that's on Sunday, April 6th at 11:30 a.m. If you haven't read the report, it's available on aspire.marketron.com. You can download it there and get all of these great data notes that Gordon talked about it today. So again, thank you, Gordon, and
Thank you, Beth.
great conversation.
Great. Appreciate it. Thank you.